So this is kind of like the most American movie video I'll ever make. That was a colorful bug that was on my windshield just there. And you generally shouldn't make these because it's against like safety standards to like make a movie while driving. But it's a very ESTP sort of TESC thing to do. And I'm making this video for my YouTube channel because I'm thinking like it's not been flowing like it should be flowing, you know? And how I want it to be flowing is like diarrhea. Oh God, this channel is never gonna be popular. How I want it to be flowing is where I'm going, and where I'm going you never knowing, and I no show everything I'm no showing. Goshen. So this video is about sources and shit like that, and I thought I'd expand it beyond this sort of like dialogue about, you know, screens and all that shit that we usually have, because we think of this kind of like technological divide between like the material and the choice aspect, and like then the life we have is essentially ludic. It's a ludic loop, like in dating apps and stuff, where you have a ludic loop, and the actions that you're participating in are less for themselves than for the play, the game that you're participating in, which is like manipulating things that are like sub-rational, not actually, you know, for this kind of higher PFC sort of thing, but more for this amygdala reward center sort of shit, right? And then you can generalize this to like our information diet generally, right? And then when we say things, we also digest them. I believe, who was it, Hegel or something, had that thing on sublimation of ideas and how you react to them and stuff. And this is so very important because, going back to screens, that whole idea, we have this kind of latency in technology that we gain when we put things down in writing of so many forms. We put them down and we gain things and we lose things. We gain understanding, we gain this iterability that is easy, that is something that you can put down and pick back up again. And in terms of this whole knowledge base, this art base, going from the measure to the culture aspect of things, once you get writing, you can record things like music, you can put a theory to that whole thing, you can have multiple different instruments, you start to have that sort of capacity where a multicultural sort of, you know, reference of one person to the other, and a study of like what makes it unique, and therefore a sort of idea of identity of all these things like swing and stuff. So you're constantly translating between this like real time and this turn-based aspect of stuff, you know? And so when you're wondering, as you do in life, what is to be done, then in this whole fucking context, what's massively important is just how the fuck you fucking even fucking tell what the fuck you're doing, you know? So, you know, your plans, all these stuff, notions of, you know, what's the best for you, the future, all these things are their own sort of mental technology that you only have in part because of writing, because even if you aren't in a writing civilization, you're still in a civilization that depends on writing, that depends on consistency, that depends on analysis and reflection and all these sorts of things that, you know, gives meaning to these smaller things, these categories of things that wouldn't have those meanings before. Like, for instance, a sound unit in an African language, like a word, is that meaningful by itself, you know, versus in context, in a sentence, it has so much more meaning, and these idea words and stuff. So then quickly going into the second half of this video, right? What are sources, what are screens that we find in art and people and sources, different sources for knowledge, gurus and stuff like that. And of course, this whole thing we find ourselves in with specialty and objectivity and studying things and being broad-minded, having a lot of knowledge from a lot of places, and I'm gonna kill this guy who's running across the street, is that just we have books, movies, music, games, all this stuff by which to like learn new stuff, hobbies, all this knowledge, all this kind of ways to be, right? And communities to be in, people to talk to, people with their past knowledge, ways that you can gather interest or knowledge or information or other experience and kind of make judgments, make inductions, all this sort of stuff that's natural to human knowledge. This fucking guy. Don't you fucking dare. Okay. And so, what's my perspective here as a person on the fucking internet who's like talking to you like, oh, I have all this knowledge about the internet. That's the energy. It's the energy of that fucking comic book nerd from The Simpsons and like, you know, knowing and stuff, but not like signifying, not like really knowing, not being hip and shit, and like even saying this stuff, it sounds sort of cringe, and you're like, oh yeah, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but I'm still speaking like this. Jesus fucking Christ, I'm overwhelming myself. Oh, fuck. That was... I think someone has a voodoo doll somewhere and they're getting me to act like this, and I was like, my heart rate is going up. But books and things I've found with like the speed of information, right? And like, oh, Harry, you're going to be very knowledgeable when you get to a very old age. And people say that to me like this, and when I do impressions and stuff, and like synthesize knowledge, say things in a Dr. Seuss sort of way. A guy I was speaking to yesterday, I believe, he was talking about like these different concepts of systems. Like an explainable system, usually, you know, its utility is very, you know, there's an inversely proportional relationship if you put it from like each of these from like 0 to 100% to like how something works, understanding how something works, and then knowing that it works, you know, so that the more something works, the less likely we are to understand it. It's speaking in terms of like, hey, he gave this example of like recidivism in this model that they tried to adjust it so that it would be less discriminatory towards black people, right? But then it became more so. And so it stresses this thing with complex systems that you can try to adjust them, but there's always this sort of steering problem that you get between understanding that it works and knowing how it works. And if you're trying to like put the spanner in the works and shit like that, whether you're trying to do a good thing or not, which I think we'd say, you know, it's good to combat prejudice, but then the thing is that it's hard to combat prejudice, I guess, is the underlying point, because it's hard to adjust the system in such a way that, you know, it works in the way that we want it to, because the system is already so complex, you know, and that relationship between how it works and whether it works is like all fucked up, you know? When we try to clarify how it works, we can fuck up it working. When we try to make it work, we fuck up knowing how it works. These people always cutting in front of me. I fucking hate them. I fucking hate you. This has been an episode of Harry Puts On an Indian Accent. Was it good? Was it bad? Am I gonna be hit by a car that's coming right at me? Put a like in the doobly-doo. Subscribe if you want to subscribe. Cry if you want to cry. It's good to cry. So then there's this whole environment of people explaining things, but like, you know, things aren't explainable, I guess. So then what would I say in terms of sources then? Because you have to understand things, but sometimes it's just better. It's also similar to this, it was this essay I was reading by, not Simone de Beauvoir, but something in this essay collection. And it was, the title was, What is a Masterpiece? It was by one of those like early feminists, and it was somewhere in the 1930s. And she was saying, you know, a lot of people while writing, you know, they plan a lot and all that stuff, but then it doesn't really end up a masterpiece. So there's this aspect to things that it just works, and you never understand how it works. So this interrupts our sort of trying to understand, trying to like do it in like this mortal way. And I guess this is just kind of like, it sounds frustrating, and it sounds sort of like this sort of mystical like approach to like, oh, you know, people are really genius and shit. But like, I guess, I don't fucking know. I mean, that itself, you have to remember, also is just kind of a myth that we like to hear. And so, you know, the explanation that, you know, things aren't explainable itself falls in a category of systems that would kind of go against itself. You know, that isn't itself a statement that we fully understand, because something is going to contravene against that in terms of like the system of all systems that go into all philosophy, which all philosophy, all knowledge is related to all other knowledge, purportedly, or at least that's how it seems. And so if that knowledge is like other knowledge, it's gonna also, you know, fail in explaining itself. Oh, I hate paradoxes. But yeah, with this video coming to a close, how do I find sources? Sources you can find anywhere, but the main source is your heart. Ah ha 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 ha. The main source is the friends we made along the way. Shit. Oh shit. That's a good video. I could try again later. Fuck it, you know, like, my lights are on now. What should you read? I don't fucking know. I can't make good videos. What do you expect of me? You expect too goddamn much of me. You know, what you wanted, go to your fucking room, that's what. You know, I understand parents now. You know, you're asking why? I'm gonna whoop your fucking ass, that's why. Let me get my belt off real quick. You know, like, you know, here's what I'm gonna teach you. I'm gonna teach you a little fucking respect, little boy.